guaranteed sun, which hasn't turned out to be that way, so we were registering a complaint about that, with Senator Bob Hogue, who is in position to do something about it, I'm sure. Bob, it's great to see you.
Well, it's great to see you, Grant, and I tell you what, I still hear from people from Iowa all the time. I still root for the Hawkeyes, and no matter what sport it is, and encourage people to come out here from Iowa. And we'll do a much better job of bringing in sunshine the next time that the Iowa people are here. But I can tell you, here's the one good thing about the rain. That's why everything is so green, and why the flowers are so beautiful, and the plants, etc. So every once in a while, the rain must fall.
Must fall, and the temperatures have been great. So
yeah, that's right. We're always in the 70s and 80s, and every once in a while in the 90s.
We really are not complaining. So we're here in Bob's office in the State Capitol building in Honolulu, where he represents the 24th Senatorial District in the Hawaii legislature. Having moved into that career out of sports broadcasting and a business background, and he hasn't abandoned any of that, I believe is kind of the case. So we will be talking about, let's kind of start out with what you're doing now, Bob, and then work back through your experience and spend a lot of time talking about an institution we know as the Iowa Television Network, in which you were the play-by-play man for a pretty great era in Iowa basketball.
Well, I certainly remember that time, and these days I'm in the state senate. I'm the minority floor leader here in Hawaii. We have 25 state senators representing the 25 districts among the 8 islands of population. So I represent the area of Kailua and Kaneohe, and I'm a Republican state senator, which puts us in a terrific minority. So it's kind of difficult for us to pass our legislation through, but we're working hard at it. We have a Republican governor right now. We're working very hard to pass through her agenda. I moved into politics after my career as a television sportscaster came to an end right about the turn of the century. As a matter of fact, right about 2000. I've been elected twice here to the state senate. It's a part-time job, and my other part-time jobs are in the media, so I continue.
You still do play-by-play on both radio and television?
That's right. I still do play-by-play, now doing for Hawaii Pacific University basketball and their women's volleyball program, which is nationally ranked. I also do play-by-play on radio of the high school championships here, also their weekly, Friday night game of the week, whether it's in basketball or football or baseball. So I keep my hand in that, and I also do writing for midweek and other magazines as well. So I enjoy it.
You're doing a game tonight, aren't you?
As a matter of fact, we were supposed to do a game tonight, but due to some technical problems, we're not going to be able to do this particular game. Ironically, it was going to be between Castle and Kailua, 2 teams that are in my senatorial district. So I could not only be a play-by-play man, but a politician as well.
Get into a couple of extra licks there.
That's right.
So that's where you are now. Let's go back to and sort of do a chronology of your experience. You graduated with a degree in business and are a certified public accountant, which is one of the mantles that you wear. And you actually practiced in that field for a while.
That's right. It's probably the most unusual job transition that anybody's come up with, from CPA to sportscaster. But I actually got into accounting because I was good in math. I was good at figuring out all those baseball averages, and thought that that would be a great career for me. As it turned out, it wasn't exactly to my liking. And I found that in many ways my personality was not a perfect fit. I recall one day on the job where my supervisor called me in and said, "Bob, you can't be laughing with the client." And so I thought, this does not fit. It doesn't. So I realized that my days as a CPA were numbered. I went back to broadcasting school. I got, essentially as like a degree,
Yeah.
and decided to go off to see the USA the broadcasting way.
And you started in Great Falls, Montana.
Well, actually, even before that, I was in radio at
Okay.
a little radio station, KNOT, not. It was not radio. And we had a great time there doing a breakfast show at a little country parlor, talking news of the day.
Wow.
Taught me about interviewing skills. My dad had played ball with a sportscaster in Phoenix, and he invited me to come down and, you know, put a tape together. I did. First place I sent it out to was Great Falls, Montana, and I was applying for a news reporter job, and the guy said, "How'd you like to be our sports director?" So I went jumping up and down around my house there in Prescott, Arizona, and was just thrilled to finally actually be in the field that I wanted to be in.
Not in a huge market in Great Falls.
Not at all.
The station call was KFBB.
KFBB in Great Falls, Montana. And a great experience. We had only 4 people working in the department, so if the anchor man was sick, that meant I did the sports and the weather. Sometimes I did the weekend news. I'd go out and I'd report on the news all during the day and then throw the sports together at night. It was a great experience.
Oh, you really do learn to do it
Yeah.
all. From there to Northwest Iowa and KTIV Channel 4 in Sioux City, and about what time frame would that have been?
This was the late 1970s. We were going to go up against a juggernaut station there in Sioux City, and so they wanted to bring the young whippersnappers into Sioux City to try to show those juggernaut a thing or
On
two.
Channel 9.
Yeah, I think they continued to dominate there.
For a
But
while.
that's right. But I got my feet wet in Iowa, and I started to learn about just the wonderful people of Iowa and how much they cared about their community. So again, a great experience, and it was my first opportunity to learn about KWWL, work with Ron Steele. We did a couple of football games together, and I learned that, wow, this is a great place to do sports.
So just to put it in perspective, KTIV at that time was owned by Blackhawk Broadcasting Company, and the flagship of that company was Channel 7, KWWL, in Waterloo,
Right.
in Cedar Rapids, Waterloo, Dubuque, Iowa City market. And we did a really pretty nasty thing to KTIV. Who was the news director over there? Was Beecher?
Mike Beecher.
Was Beecher, and
That's
Stoyer
right.
was the manager.
That's right.
Right. And so we sort of lured Bob Hogue to Waterloo, and you came over to do sports on Channel 7.
That's right. That was in 1979.
79.
And the year prior to that was the first time that the University of Iowa had been, some of their games had been actually broadcast in basketball. And it was such a small thing. I think they had a 2-camera shoot.
Yeah.
The ball would come across half court and they would switch to the other camera. Just really small.
Very primitive.
Very primitive. And but Ron did those games, and I got an opportunity to kind of tag along, if you will, doing not basketball, but in a high school football state championship game at the Unidome, and I think that was where they were testing me to see if they wanted to pull me over to KWWL, and as it turned out, they did.
Well, you were hired to do to be the Monday through Friday
Right.
sports anchor on Channel 7.
As you know, there was a lot of work to do there, because it was not only did you do the 6 and 10 o'clock
Yeah.
sports, but we had an FM radio station, an AM radio station. I had to do the sports on those in the afternoon. I had to make sure that I left a morning sports report for the radio. It was a full-time and a half job.
We got our money's worth out of you.
That's exactly right, and you know, and I was more than willing to run around.
Yeah. Part of your own shooting out, you'd go out and shoot games at night.
Yeah, I would, and I really enjoyed that.
2-person sports department was Mike what?
Oh, actually, when I came there, Ken Hughey was the weekend sports guy, and he left not too long after that. And Mike Hedin came in from Duluth, Minnesota, and we were great friends, great partners, and not only did we did we try to cover as many sports as we possibly could, but we also got young people involved as interns to go out and cover sports.
Right.
And it made for some real crazy nights, but man, oh man, people got their money's worth when they watched KWWL sports.
They did indeed, and you were up there on that set with the magic combination. Ron Steele, Liz Mathis, and Craig Johnson.
You know, not only did we work well together on the set, but we were all great friends off the set. These were just fantastic members of the community, people that we all cared about each other, and I think that really carried over on TV, and people realized that.
No question.
An indication, I think, of I don't mean to be patting us on the back about our popularity, but we had this basketball team that on Sundays we called them the Super Shooters, and we would tour around northwest Iowa to the little small towns, and virtually everybody in those towns would show up. They would pack the gymnasiums to watch the TV personalities play against their team, and we had just a blast. They'd pay us maybe a couple $100. We would make sure that we spent that money in their town, afterwards for a steak and a beer or something like that. And it it worked both ways. It was a great time for us to get together, and it was great for the TV station to get involved with the communities.
And you were part of the magic then, which built the ratings for those newscasts into a very, very dominant #1.
Well, I'm really proud to be a part of that. I've always said that I didn't look at the ratings. I felt that the ratings would follow if you did a good job.
Yeah.
And I think that we did a good job.
You did a good job, absolutely. Well, and this was the point at which KWWL gets a contract with the University of Iowa to now do something better than a 2-camera shoot and actually produce a statewide television network.
I think a lot of people thought that Bill Bolster was crazy, and but it just goes to show that he was such a leader in this, a man who was dynamic enough to think that he could bring stations of different ownerships together to broadcast sports. We had to preempt the NBC Thursday night lineup, which, as you remembered, I think had Hill Street Blues and some other fantastic shows, and we got phenomenal ratings. 70 to 80% of the state would be tuned in to the basketball broadcasts. I heard a story that the highway patrol called off their cars during that time because there were no cars on the road, not at all, because during that 2-hour slot, everybody was inside their homes watching the games.
And that's not an exaggeration.
Yeah.
It was a real phenomenon. Well, I want to come back to it and talk a lot more about that. But at a certain point, you were a California boy originally, weren't you?
That's right. I grew up in Southern California, in Orange County, and I went to the University of Southern California. Opportunity there to pitch a little baseball. I wasn't the greatest collegiate pitcher in the world, but I had a great time, and I still am very proud of the now national championship USC Trojans. I follow them as much as I follow the Iowa Hawkeyes and their great tradition as well.
So you made your next move into a pretty substantial market change out to Sacramento, the state capital, and let's see, those called KCRA.
KCRA was a major market. We were 20th in the nation. The Kelly brothers ran a station there that I think also was kind of ahead of the curve as far as technology was concerned. They were some of the first to go out and get live shots and satellite shots. When the Super Bowl occurred, I, as the sports director, would go to the site of the Super Bowl. We would bring the KCRA truck, whether it was in New Orleans or San Diego. I mean, this is really big time. If there was a big event that happened somewhere in California, KCRA was there. So it was another very dominant #1 news station, and I was proud to be a part of it for the 4 years that I was there.
Who was the news director there when you were there? Was it Jordan?
No, Pete Langlois was the news director, and then Jordan came in right at the tail end for kind of a brief time. And
he was a Channel 7 alum. I don't know if you ever knew that or not.
I guess I was aware of that
He anchored the 6 o'clock
Oh.
news when I joined Blackhawk in
Oh, no kidding.
1972.
How about that?
And he's a shaker and mover.
Yeah. Well, I think it was his job to come in and kind of shake up things before he moved on to somewhere else.
Well, then the islands called to you.
Well, you know, as will happen oftentimes, you talked about Jordan coming in. He shook up things, and that meant that some people were out looking for work elsewhere. I was one of those people. I decided to look here in Hawaii. This is where my mother was from, and so after a courtship that lasted a few months, they finally decided to hire me as the sports director. Again, the dominant #1 news station in the market, and I was the sports director for 12 years here, and we continue to get those, you know, fantastic ratings, and a wonderful place to live and have my family and have the kids grow up.
Well, you also continue to do some play. You did University of Hawaii play-by-play, didn't you?
Yes, I did University of Hawaii play-by-play for a few years in football and basketball until it became obvious that it would be very difficult to separate the news side of my job with the play-by-play side, and I think the University of Hawaii wanted someone who absolutely could be 100% supportive of them for every single time. And I said, you know what, I've got a job to do, and if there's bad news, we've got to report it.
You still believe in that?
And I do. You know, absolutely. You've got to be you have to be true to your audience, and they respect you for that.
That's right. And so you continued then. You did the evening newscasts.
That's right. I did the 6 and 10 o'clock news, and actually here in Hawaii, you know, because of the stuff that I learned at KWWL, I not only did the 6 and 10 o'clock, but I also had to do a morning sports wrap, so that I had to record that in there. At one point, we had what was called an extra edition, which went after the 10 o'clock news. I was on that as well. So, again, I think KCRA was getting their money's worth. And we also had an award-winning show on Sunday night called Hawaii Sports Final. It just this last summer went off the air after a tremendous 11-year run, and it was an opportunity to go in depth and do stories like sports has never been covered, and we got tremendous accolades for that, and I was proud to start that.
Right. Well, then your career, tell us about the shift into your political career then, Bob.
Well, after Channel 2 let me go, certainly I had tremendous name recognition, so the political parties started to come forward, and I was asked to run for virtually every office from Congress on down to City Council, including Mayor and State Senate and State House. My wife and I, we've thought about it for a long time, and finally made the decision to run for the State Senate, and it's worked out.
And you're in what term are you in?
This is my second term.
Second term.
Right.
The 4-year terms?
Well, it's one of these unusual things where my first term was 2 years, and then they have reapportionment, and so this term is 4 years, and if I run and get reelected again, the next term would be 4 years as well.
Okay.
Somehow they've got to fit 4-4-2 or 2-4-4 into 10 years.
I see.
There you go.
Well, that's the way they do it out here.
That's the way they do it out here.
And that's what you're doing now, in addition then to still keeping your hand in sports.
That's exactly right. So it's a wonderful marriage, because you know the stresses of being in politics, you need to have a stress release, and I can't think of a better one than sports.
That's right. And again, you and your wife Elaine and
that's right.
Your 4 kids live in Kailua?
Yeah, we live in Kailua. We live very close to the beach. In fact, we live with Elaine's mother in a home right behind her home near the beach, and you know it's about 100 feet from the most beautiful beach in the world. So we love living in Kailua.
I don't think we're going to get you back to Iowa somehow.
I don't mind visiting, and I tell you what, Iowa, you know, there are tremendous similarities, I think, between the people of Hawaii and the people of Iowa. They care about their community, and you really get that sense here.
That's great. Yeah, that's great. Well, now let's go back to Iowa, and let's see. This would be 20 some years ago, and this man Bolster, who was managing Channel 7 at that time, later on took NBC stations from third to top in St. Louis, KSDK, and then the NBC flagship in New York. And then NBC moved him to CNBC, and he made a big success out of that. And he's now in the process, I guess, of retiring from CNBC International CEO. So I guess that suggested what you said earlier, that he was a pretty innovative, hard-driving guy.
He really was. Had a very strong personality. I mean, you always knew when Bill Bolster came into the room because he just absolutely took over, and his, I think, positive enthusiasm carried the day. I know that people thought he was nuts when he started, but he really started something. We were doing broadcasts of Iowa basketball before people even thought about that. I mean, now it's become absolutely standard place all over the country, but we were doing live broadcasts
on a statewide network.
Right.
So it was, if not the first regional network, it certainly was one of the first.
It absolutely had to be, and I mean, we were doing games before ESPN. I remember when ESPN was born. We'd already established. In fact, ESPN contacted me on a couple of occasions and asked me to do play-by-play because they were just. They really wanted to know how to do it, and we've all seen what the juggernaut that ESPN has become. So Iowa Television Network was there and doing it before they were.
So what Bolster did is put together the three NBC affiliates in Iowa, KWWL, WHO in Des Moines, WOC in Davenport, and then tied in a CBS affiliate at Mason City, KIMT.
Right.
And that gave them really total coverage of the state of Iowa.
Yeah, I don't think there was a place in Iowa where you couldn't catch a game.
Right. And they had a production unit called that they called Carnaby Square, which was a fully equipped production van. And the guy who ran that unit was Mike Schreers. You remember?
I do remember Mike, and the production unit, they just cared so much. I mean, they would get to the site very, very early. They would map the thing out. At that time, it wasn't uncommon for live broadcasts of events to have kind of a low quality effect to them. Not with the Iowa Television Network. Carnaby Square and Iowa Television Network, everything was first rate, top of the line quality, and I could tell that our audiences appreciated that.
Chuck Lutz was the unit manager, wasn't he?
Yes, he was
the guy who was shaping everybody up to get that result.
Right, and he was a real detail-oriented guy, and you have to be in that position.
Right. So Bolster talked the University of Iowa into making a contract with Channel 7 to run the statewide network, and that took some doing.
It really did. In fact, if the story is correct, the first time I think Iowa made like $10,000 out of the deal, which by today's standards seems like just change, right? And then I want to say the second contract, which was kind of the big one in which all of the stations went in, I think it was only about $100,000, which again seems like pocket change.
Yeah, well, that wasn't pocket change that they got from the advertising when they got those 80 shares.
Yeah, that's exactly right.
Bolster will tell you stories about that.
Yes.
And you had a guy by the name Lute Olson running that basketball program at that time.
Yeah, Lute Olson was first class in every manner of the phrase. He looked first class.
Yeah.
He just when he came on the court, you felt like he almost was gliding on the court, so to speak, as if somehow he was above the fray, and yet he was a very, very intellectual basketball mind, and we've seen, the tremendous job that he's gone on to do, not only at Iowa, but at the University of Arizona as well.
Right.
He put Iowa back on the map. Iowa was no stranger from being, in the national spotlight.
It had some glory days before that.
Absolutely.
But they had really sagged in between.
They had sagged in between, and so he brought them back with that tremendous luster. And in fact, the first season of the Iowa Television Network, we went to the Final Four. That was 1979-1980.
It was the first Okay.
Yeah.
They got to the Final Four.
We got to the Final Four that year. In fact, there were two Big Ten teams in the Final Four that year, Iowa and Purdue, along with UCLA with Kiki Vandeweghe and Louisville with Darrell Griffith, and Louisville won the national title.
And that was 79-80?
That was actually, yeah, it was 79-80. I think there had been a game, there had been some games done the previous season,
right.
But they weren't Iowa Television Network. I think it was just
KWL.
It was that
sort of, let's try this
Yeah,
out,
yeah, right,
to get
exactly.
a bit of a model for it.
Yeah, yeah.
And you did a weigh-in at home?
Yeah, we did. That first year, as I recall, I want to say that the number that pops into my head was 9 games. And actually, it seems that first year we only did home games.
Okay.
That's my recollection.
But you got to away at home. You got to the point.
Eventually, I think it was the next season that we actually started to travel to the other Big Ten sites, and we did games at Michigan State. I remember an incredibly memorable one of beating Indiana. Wisconsin, I remember Wisconsin 60 below, and they kept the doors open. It was like the ball was frozen. I mean, there were some real memorable games along the way at different sites.
I'm sure there were. And so you were the play-by-play person, and yours.
Well, Sharm Sherman is the man who eventually became the kind of like permanent color guy.
Yeah.
But the first color man was a legendary broadcaster in Iowa, Frosty Mitchell.
Oh, Frosty was with you in those early seasons.
That's right. The first season it was Frosty Mitchell.
Okay.
The second season they got a guy who had played basketball for Iowa, I believe in the 40s. His name was Bob Schultz.
Okay.
And so he was from Des Moines, and he came and did the games. At that time, Sharm Sherman was the color man on the preeminent radio broadcast with Jim Zabel at WHO Radio. And Bill Bolster, always trying to go out and see if he could get the absolute, top person that he could get, finally was able to sway Sharm Sherman away from the radio and get him over on television.
And of course, Sharm was a very notable alum of Iowa basketball play.
That's right. He had played basketball at Iowa, and then he had coached as actually a guy in his 20s and had become a businessman. I got an opportunity to play ball with Sharm Sherman a couple of times when we were on the road. Still a fantastic athlete, even though he was much older than I was.
And was McCausland ever with you then, or was that later?
Mac McCausland came in after, but I knew Mac. He was from Waterloo, and in fact, Mac McCausland took the spot on WHO Radio.
Okay.
Yeah, he had been just a tremendous friend of Iowa basketball, very good friend of the Olsons.
Right.
And he was just one of those guys who I think originally was kind of a hanger-arounder of the program, who eventually became entrenched and part of the program. I remember many times just, talking to Mac to get some kind of inside knowledge, if you will. He's just a great basketball fan.
Well, tell me about, now here's this experiment in television coverage of live sports. In those first couple of seasons, you had some, first go to the Final Four. What kind of a sense did you get that there's a lot of people out there listening and watching us?
First sense that I got was that when I first started my job at KWWL, I would go out into the community and I would, show up at a gymnasium somewhere and I would videotape some of the game.
Yeah.
I don't remember whether it was the first season or the second season or which season it was, but I showed up in this gym that I'd been in a few times previously.
Yeah.
I walked into the gym, and it was like one of those scenes from a movie where first you hear a buzz, then you start hearing an applause, and then it rolled through the gym as I was giving a standing ovation. I was just the cameraman showing up, so that I could show some highlights on my local news broadcast, and they're giving me a standing ovation. And then I started to get letters from people. People would make me things. One group, because my saying became "Oh my,"
Yeah.
because of that, a local group got my license plate turned to "Oh my," and so it became unbelievably big. I cannot tell you how big it was.
You didn't dare go to a supermarket, did you? Get home at by 11 o'clock?
Well, people would stop me everywhere. People would yell "Oh my" everywhere. There is a scene in the movie The Natural, which came out in the early 80s, in which they have a broadcaster say certain comments when Robert Redford character hits a home run.
Yeah.
Well, he says, "Oh my."
Oh.
I'm sure only in an Iowa theater the entire place broke out in applause, because I remember I was in my seat and I just melted down like I cannot believe that just happened.
Well, for this audience, which will be, I don't know who, but this is an archival piece that
Sure.
we're doing. The "Oh my" was when there was really a spectacular play. Can you give us an "Oh my" that gives us some sense of that?
Hanson for a breakaway, slam dunk, oh my!
Now you know.
And there were many times when it was much more over the top than that. I would get so excited, and so that on a couple of games, for whatever reason, I don't know why, but I didn't give an "Oh my," and people would call and deluge the station. Why wasn't there an "Oh my"? I now realize that I had to do "Oh my's," and still to this day, I mean, what has it been? Almost 20 years later, I'll pick up the phone and somebody will go, "Is this Bob Oh my Hogue?"
Sorry, I didn't do that. But I remember it very well. I do indeed.
Well, I have to give credit where it's due there, because I grew up watching UCLA basketball in Los Angeles. And you talk about being kind of like ahead of the curve.
Yeah.
UCLA was one of the first universities to actually broadcast their games on television. They didn't do them live. They did them after the news.
Right.
Okay, and Dick Enberg, who was, at that time, nobody knew him at all. He was just this young fella who had barely played like minor league hockey or something like that had been picked up by the station to do minor league hockey broadcasts. Well, he was asked to do the UCLA basketball games. Well, it was he that actually uttered this phrase, "Oh my."
I see.
And so when I went to Iowa, and I'd become a big Dick Enberg fan, and he had gone on to earn a national, reputation because of this, I think it just came out one game, and then it got a positive response, and then eventually it became as much Iowa basketball as anything. I don't think that I think it became more Iowa than it ever was at UCLA.
Right. Well, the incredible thing and so we've got one of Bolster's stories is that he and Lute were invited to be the supporting cast for a wedding at a nursing home in Storm Lake. Everybody was watching Iowa basketball. 80 shares means 80% of all the television sets that are turned on are watching that particular program.
That's exactly right, and we were just unbelievably huge, and I don't think there will ever be another day like that.
There are no shares like that anywhere.
That's right. The proliferation of cable, and I think also the fact that it was new.
Right.
So it got to be exciting. I'm sure that they still have big numbers for Iowa basketball and football, etc., but not like that.
But not in that range.
No.
And the other, Bolster, again, to give him credit, had to talk the university athletic, I guess the whole officialdom, because they were scared to death. You mentioned UCLA delayed the games.
Right.
You wouldn't...
they were concerned that it would somehow harm attendance.
Take the house.
But, ironically, if memory serves me correct, that first year, we had a couple of games where they did not sell the place out. And as soon as they got to be on television, it actually made them more popular. It not only made them more popular at the, first the old field house, but then Carver Hawkeye Arena, but then students wanted to go there more. I think it helped their enrollment. I mean, it helped the university's image in so many ways.
There is no doubt the university benefited
tremendously.
hugely. One of the things that Bill says is that he, in order to convince them, he had to promise that if they didn't sell out, that he'd make up the difference.
Yeah, and I doubt that he had to ever do that.
He didn't ever have to. He didn't ever have to. So again, it was a great benefit to the university program because of this immense amount of exposure that the university was getting.
That's right, and you should have seen, I was talking to you about the celebrity status that I received.
Yeah.
It was nothing compared to the celebrity status of the players.
Yeah.
Steve Carfino, who was a point guard, a real nice looking young man from Bellflower, California, was a 4-year starter at point guard during that time period when I was there.
Mm-hmm.
And one summer we hired Steve to be an intern because he was thinking about getting into sports as a career. Everywhere I went, it was like practically almost like a riot would start. People would come forward. They wanted. It was as if he was a rock star.
Mm-hmm.
And he also, because of a suggestion we'd made about our super shooter basketball team, when he graduated, he and his buddy Wayman King, they started this like traveling Iowa basketball team, and they went around and they just like busted attendance records at some of these, small towns around there. And ironically, I was going to, one night, I think they had a traffic accident or something, and one of their cars ran off the road, and Wayman King was, not badly hurt, but just, hurt a little bit in this traffic accident. We had people calling the TV station, sobbing in tears. I mean, it was just, it was unreal, the celebrity status and how much these players were genuinely loved.
Right. Well, who were some of the other players? You saw some great players during that period.
Oh yeah, well, Ronnie Lester on that first team, leading the team back and beating Georgetown in the regional finals with Steve Krassison and Steve Waite were on that team. I remember Vince Brookins with the great outside jump shot, Kevin Boyle. Steve Carfino, we talked about him, Michael Payne, Greg Stokes, Bobby Hansen.
Yeah.
I'm sure that I'm going to, forget a few names because these guys were all phenomenal players of the highest level. On a couple of occasions, I went down to Carver Hawkeye Arena and I played in a game, with these guys, and just to be out on the same court, I was just. I really fully realized the enormity of their talent.
Yeah, real athletes.
Oh, just absolutely. I mean, I'm 6'5", pretty big guy, and I thought I was a decent basketball player. Well, when I played them, then that's when I really realized how good they were.
That's finding out about the culture down there.
I got to tell you, I did make one shot, getting a screen and making a jump shot over Brad Lohaus. Remember Brad?
Well,
7 feet, played in the NBA. Right. So take that, Brad. I actually made a shot over you.
You should have that one framed.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Most of them came back in my face.
Well, how about some of the great games that you broadcast during that period?
One stands out. I mentioned this a little bit earlier about playing Indiana at their gymnasium there, Assembly Hall. And you need to know that the way that the field house is built there at Indiana, you're real close up to the court, and you've got the fans kind of hovering over behind you, if you will. It's kind of an elliptical type of shaped arena. So as the game built up in intensity in the second half, it started to get warmer. I think just the heat that was coming from all the fans getting all worked up. Yeah. Well, I was worked up as well, and Iowa was going for their first win at Indiana in many, many years.
In the land of Bobby Knight.
Yeah, exactly. And so the tremendous emotions there, and so I was known for getting worked up during a broadcast anyway, but at the end of the broadcast, when Bobby Hansen stole the ball and we won the game, I remember I almost fainted, just dead away because the blood rushed up to my head. I was trying really, really hard. I think Sharm Sherman, who was next to me, he said that, you know, I looked like I'd been in a battle or something like that because I was so pumped up. But I was able to maintain my composure and get us off the air. And people were so excited because we finally beat Bobby Knight in Indiana.
Beat Bobby Knight in Indiana.
Right.
Yeah.
Another one. Here's another game, an example of kind of like, I guess really a negative story, but just the power of the Iowa Television Network. We were playing Purdue. This was a game that would give us an opportunity to, I believe it was, gain a share of the Big Ten championship. We had just lost a heartbreaker to Minnesota, so we had to win this game against Purdue. And it went to overtime, and it came down, there was like 3 really controversial calls at the end of the game. Usually, we didn't mention the name of the referee that was involved, but in this particular case, we kept saying that Jim Bain had made this call, and Jim Bain was a guy who had always had kind of this running, controversial relationship, we'll call it, with Lute Olson. Lute Olson was always all over Jim Bain. So at the end of the game, it was a tie game. We were going for the final shot, and we missed the shot, and Jim Bain came out from underneath the basket with a whistle, and we're thinking, oh, good, a foul, we're going to go to the line. No, he calls a foul on an Iowa guy. So he calls a foul on the Iowa guy. The Purdue guy goes down, no time left on the clock, makes the winning free throws. We lose the game. Well, the game is over. I'm saying that Iowa lost the game, and Jim Bain made this horrible call. I see Lute Olson chasing into the tunnel as the officials run off. I turn to Sharm Sherman to, wrap up, and Sharm is gone. And I look down, and Sharm is racing into the tunnel. Well, what had happened, I found this out later, Lute Olson had gone to the officials' dressing room, and Sharm had actually chased Lute to make sure that Lute didn't do anything, didn't harm Jim Bain. But Sharm had a great line. He said, I was going to make sure that he didn't do anything, but if he'd already done it, I was going to get in there with him. But at the end of that broadcast, because we had, broadcast Jim Bain's name, practically the entire state of Iowa came down on that poor man. I actually met him later and apologized to him because he received letters, phone threats. It was actually turned out to be kind of I'm sure not a good story about sometimes how fans can become fanatical.
Right. Yeah. Right. Tend to get carried away.
They really did there. But most of the time, the Iowa fans were just fantastically positive and really got behind their team. In fact, when we beat Georgetown to win the NCAA regionals that year, and this is another, I think, power of the Iowa Television Network, 10,000 people were there at the field house that night. In other words, they, at a moment's notice, no one had any idea that we were going to win that game. They had not planned any kind of a homecoming. 10,000 people came to the Iowa field house that night.
Came back.
When the team came back. It was just a sight like nobody had ever seen before.
Right. Well, you really were a part of a phenomenon that is, I think, unparalleled in broadcasting history. It has always seemed that way to me.
Well, I cherish the memories, think back about those games, and in many ways I wish I could, go back in time and just live them again, because it was absolutely unreal.
It was indeed, and a proud chapter. I mean, and certainly you were a pretty good play-by-play man, Mr. Hogue.
Well, I enjoyed the games immensely, and I realized that, if from time to time people thought that I was a little overly enthusiastic, they had to know that that was genuine enthusiasm.
Of course it was. Of course it was. Well, we talked about a number of things here, and let's talk a little bit about you came to Honolulu, and I don't remember the sequence on this, but you crossed paths with a guy named Stan Sheriff.
That's exactly right. Well, Stan Sheriff was the football coach at the University of Northern Iowa, and he and I became, really good friends while he was there. And I used to do the Iowa games, the football games in the afternoon, and then drive back at night to go to the UNI football games. And UNI had a terrific team in those days.
Right.
And then the next morning, I would be hosting the Stan Sheriff Show. And Stan was one of these guys who, after the game, would stay up all night long with his buddies. I think they would tip a few, and somehow would manage, whether by hook or by crook, to get to the station just moments before we went on the air. And I think the show was at 11 or 11:30 in the morning on Sunday morning, and we would never know until he walked into the studio whether he was going to arrive. So you had to anticipate in your mind, okay, I'm going to do a show, I'm not going to have the football coach, I've got it mapped up on my mind. In some cases, I would be in the intro when he would come walking in. He would sit down in the chair, and it had been there like he'd been there the whole time.
Yeah. And so he came out here then as AD,
That's right.
Did he?
Yeah, he became the athletic director, and in fact, he is the man who has probably done as much for this university's athletic department. He's the one who kind of pushed them in the right direction for Division I football. He's the man who spearheaded the effort that built the arena, which is now holds his name. It's the Stan Sheriff Arena, much like he spearheaded the Unidome concept in Cedar Falls. They now have tremendous crowds for not only basketball, but men's and women's volleyball. We lead the nation in attendance here at the University of Hawaii. So Stan was very instrumental in that, and then he became somewhat instrumental in my getting a job here in Hawaii, because I contacted him to let him know that I had put my name in the application process.
Right.
He called the general manager and
Gave you a boost up?
Yeah, he gave me a little bit of a boost there.
Yeah.
So we were fast friends, and he was obviously taken too soon. He came back from an NCAA convention and had a heart attack. It was right after we'd won the WAC championship in a bowl game. So
Well, you have a great name in Iowa athletics. Those two stadium or arenas.
Yeah, there's not too many people that can say they actually built two fantastic arenas.
Right.
He may be the only one in the United States that has done that, and not only become a center for the university, but for the entire region, the Unidome. I remember when the Unidome there, we'd have Rolling Stones concerts, and the Police, et cetera, would come in there, and I'm sure they still have great concerts. Here we had, at the Stan Sheriff Center, they had Miss USA, and they had graduations, and all sorts of other big public community events as well are held there. The high school championships, et cetera, are held at the Stan Sheriff Center.
Yeah, well, the Unidome is still playing that role. In fact, I don't know if you've heard, they've also been authorized to add, it'll be connected to the Unidome. It's sort of it'll be basically a basketball arena.
Wow.
And the two buildings will be connected, which means they'll be able to do a lot of things, with the combination of facilities.
That's terrific. Well, I remember one of the other attributes of the Unidome there is they had this physical education center, and as you know, because you came down to see me one day after I got clobbered in one of the basketball games. I used to play basketball there 4 or 5 times a week, and it had a great time.
Sounded like you went out basketball pretty hard.
That's right. I didn't play very, very hard. I kind of led with my face first.
Did you do an oh my in that? I guess.
Well, that leads to the other story that you're aware of. In one time during a baskall game, there was a little scuffle broke out, and so I stepped into the middle of it and said, "Hey, we got to end this." And out of somewhere came somebody's fist or elbow or whatever, and popped me right in the mouth. I got like 12 stitches in the mouth and broke my nose and the whole bit. Well, the next day that was on the front page of the statewide newspaper, the Des Moines Register. Oh my, angry Cager smacks Hogue. And then, so a couple of days after that, as I wasn't even sure what I was going to do the broadcast, I think we went to I want to say it was Michigan or Michigan State next. And so here I am on the air, you know, with stitches in my mouth and a little cast on my nose, but I was there, ready to do battle.
Let us never say Bob Hogue wasn't in the middle of it.
That's right. I was in the middle of a bunch of them.
Well, again, to kind of just go back to, you will probably, I would say, never work with three finer people than you did there on that set at Channel 7, right?
Well, Ron Steele is absolutely, he's the genuine article.
Yeah.
He's a guy who cares so much. An indication of how much he cares about news. I remember when I first got there, we had an especially stormy summer, and he'd be the first guy to grab a camera to go out to cover the tornado.
Yeah.
Liz Mathis, you know, people talk about co-anchors sometimes like they're supposed to be airheads, or they don't care, they care about their makeup or whatever. Liz Mathis was the real deal.
Yeah.
She was like the girl next door. She was everybody's friend. She cared so much about not only us, but about the community that she was covering. And then Craig Johnson, I don't think you could get a smarter, a more intelligent weather meteorologist than you can in Craig Johnson. And to be able to sit there on the set with the three of them, I mean, I had tremendous respect for them, and I loved them all as well.
Well, and that, the whole, you know, all of Northeast Iowa, that's the way they saw it. They were, and you were their friends, too. That was the magic of the power of that, those newscasts.
And I could feel that when we would go out and we'd have these super shooter games, if you will, and people would come up and they would talk about how much they made KWWL a part of their kind of like family existence. I mean, you know, they would pattern their dinner hour around us, and that they really wanted to get together, and they felt like their friends were coming into their living rooms and actually giving them the news.
No question about that. Well, so you don't think you want to join us for 4 feet of snow in Iowa when we get it? You've got snow closer than that right down here on the Big Island.
I'll tell you what, Grant Price, if somehow you could offer me today to go back there and make some good money, I'd definitely go back and do it, because I loved it so much. I mean, it's such a wonderful, wonderful place. I'd go back in a minute.
Unfortunately, it's not there anymore, Bob, with the way the media have changed.
Yeah, things have definitely changed, and I'm not sure that they've changed for the better.
No.
It's unfortunate. I really do believe I don't remember whether it was Bill Bolster who had told me this, but it might have been. He said, people watch the news because they believe the people who are giving them the news.
That's right.
They want to watch people who are just folks.
Right.
And you know, you can do all the bells and whistles and do this or that, but people are going to tune into people that they know and trust and believe.
Right.
And I think that some stations today have kind of lost sight of that, and that's really unfortunate.
I'll go beyond that. I'll say most of them have.
Yeah.
Right. Sadly, and you and I both had some experience with that.
Yeah. You know, they start doing like cookie cutter news, and you can't tell, you know, Channel 7 news from Channel 9 or Channel 3 or 2 or 10 or 12. They all look exactly the same, and they all, and it's really unfortunate. And I think that was what set Channel 7 apart, is that, and when I say Channel 7, KWWL, was that the opportunity to spend a lot of time with certain stories, the opportunity for the newscasters to actually relate with that story as well, and to cover it in depth so that people really got their money's worth.
And cover the, you know, get the content.
Yeah, that's exactly right.
I think Steele said one of the attributes that he gave to me was that we not only covered all the news that moved, we also covered the news that didn't move.
There were some times that there were some boring stories on as well. So we don't want to paint this picture like everything was exciting.
But we liked significance.
Yeah.
And we covered the news. And sometimes it doesn't have pictures.
That's right. Yeah. We need more Grant Prices in control of newsrooms today, Grant.
But I don't need to be there. Anyway, I can't tell you how much I've value being able to do this, Bob. And
well, I'm
have this
proud to talk about
reunion
it too.
with you, and bring your story back to our archives, and I think there'll be some folks at Black Hawk Broadcasting who are going to be interested in that of the old school there.
Well, say hi to everybody in Iowa. I still get Christmas cards from Ron Steele and Pam Hildebrand and Craig Johnson and Gary Sarnoff and some of the great news of the past there. And I still love Iowa.
Let me give you an invitation. Last summer in July, we had a reunion of Black Hawk Broadcasting employees. And we got about 60 people to turn out for that. And a lot of those names that you, Pam wasn't able to make it, but quite a number of, Tom Peterson was there.
No kidding.
And we're going to do it again in July of this year.
Wow.
So you can make a New Year's resolution.
We'll see if I can get there, if I can get here from the islands.
If we can get your email, when we leave here, we'll get you on the list.
All right, do that. Send me an invitation.
Well, you got one now.
Thanks, Grant.
Thank you very much, Bob. Terrific experience.
Thank you.
Thank you.